Welcome back to another one, guys. We're here with Adam Traubman, better known as Trout, and Morgan Promnitz, and my good coworker Nate Lindsay. We're gonna go over some fun stuff today, mainly kayak fishing and kind of the start and the development of it as a sport. I'm not super in tune with it, so I'm really excited to get to learn about it. And I'll let these guys kind of dive in and give us a lesson.
Yeah.
Right on.
Like I was saying before, this is a long time coming, and it's worthy. It's definitely a little side pocket of fishing, and it's not super popular. I mean, it's had its moments, and the history is really awesome because it's new. It's not like we invented kayak fishing by any means, but we're just kind of modernizing it, and so it's sick knowing this guy. Like, I've known him since he was a teenager, couldn't even drive. And so we've just kind of staggered through, being different ages, different levels, different timing. And I don't know, just going through it together has been really awesome. We've known each other for what, 25
years
yeah.
Probably. Yeah, I used to work in a fish and tackle store in Solana Beach. I started working there when I was 15. Blue water tackle. It's not around anymore. But I think I met Trout either there or when my dad and I bought our first kayaks. My dad, uncle, and I. We had no idea what we were doing. I just moved here from South Africa and, tried some shore fishing here. But the fish here, although I love fishing on the shore now, were very small compared to the fish I was used to catching in South Africa. So I was like, I did some research and I found out there was bigger fish like calicos and bonita and barracuda and then later on yellowtail, white sea bass, which Trout was a huge part of teaching me how to catch a lot of that stuff. But I had to figure out a way how to get out to the kelp beds, and that's how I discovered kayak fishing. So we went and bought a couple of kayaks, and I think my first trip to La Jolla, I caught a yellowtail, which was really lucky.
Yeah.
So
There was also nobody out, which was like
way back when.
That was a really interesting thing. Is when I started, it was like early mid '90s, and we'd go out to the pier and make bait because the mackerel would go, and we'd bring whiskas. That was the go-to, and you have your
Cat food.
cat food, yeah.
Chuck some whiskas. We'd launch at like 2 a.m. sometimes, and get our max and just load up and go out. But back then there were 2 other guys, and they were these old gnarly construction workers. And later, like 15 years later, I ran into one of them at a Fred Hall show, and I was like, "You were so scary back then, dude!" Like, and so they would be at the pier, and those are the only 2 people we ever saw. And Scott Cherry, who is a legend who would fish off his longboard. And so we're like, okay, let's not bum these guys out. Let's choose 2 questions every week. So every weekend we'd go, they'd always be there, and we'd be like, "Excuse me, sir, can you And so we never were annoying. And that's how you learn, and you just, we'd slowly learn.
That was like
and,
me to him,
too.
Excuse me, sir.
Then I started going into blue water, and Morgan would be there, and he'd ask me like 2 questions every time, and pay it forward.
What size hook do I need for the mackerel, or what pound test?
Yeah.
Or, and it was crazy. Like Trout was saying, a busy day at La Jolla back then would be like 6 or 8 guys.
6, 8, 10 people.
And it was pretty cool. It's kind of like, what's that saying? Youth is wasted on the young, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew back then what I knew now. But obviously the sport of kayak fishing, compared to like what you started out on, I was on a Cobra fish and dive, a big barge, which you probably made fun of because you were, he was on a stealthy, fast ocean kayak, and you guys went through like, there were no rod holders for kayaks at the time.
Well, also, were pedal kayaks even a thing when you started?
They didn't exist.
Yeah.
The Mirage Drive came about in 1997 from Hobie, but I fished probably until 2003. I started in 2000 on a paddle kayak, and but that was the way to go. And didn't one of your friends like build the kayak tank or something?
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to talk about that later because I think R&D is a whole nother thing that came about, obviously, and you were a huge part of that. But I'm not going to lie, everyone starts somewhere, and I started in the most ridiculous little bathtub. It was crazy. So really the way that I learned about kayak fishing was my roommate JJ. He's like, "Oh, I got to go to Florida. Gonna go see my mom. Like, it'll be cool though. Usually we fish off the docks and all that." And he comes back and he's like, "Can we use potty mouth or not really?"
Yeah, go ahead.
He's like,
potty mouth.
He's like,
yeah, potty
he's
mouth.
like, you have no fucking clue what's about to go down. And he said, my mom said, "Oh, we're not gonna fish off the docks." She's like, "We're going in these." This is his mom, and there's these little sit inside kayaks. They're called kiwis, and they're like 7 feet long, and you sit inside and you put your little spray skirt on. And he said they went out, they caught redfish and, you know, speckled sea trout, all the like Florida stuff. So we come back, he gets one, and then I get one right away, and we paddle out, and we got calico. Like you said, it wasn't really about yellowtail and white sea bass and all those pelagics yet. It was like, we're catching edible fish because we were young and
So
we were
wait,
poor.
this was after your Florida trip.
After his Florida trip,
Yeah.
he came back
Oh,
and
okay.
said, my mom showed me this thing. We're going to fish in these kayaks.
Gotcha.
So very simple, one rod, and we bring crocodiles. That's like your desert island
Spoons.
your
Yeah,
companion.
the one and only crocodile.
Yeah. And then
right?
like some cut bait and squid and very little, and we would have it come out of the spray skirt, and we would go and eat. Like, it was a big deal to catch.
You feed
fresh
yourself.
fish. Yeah,
Yeah,
we fed
you're feeding
ourselves, and it
yourself.
was so cool. And then eventually Baja was a big part of our life. It always had been, from surfing and fishing and stuff. And I actually had a near-death experience because of that stupid little thing. And right after that, I went to a Fred Hall show and I met Spike, and he had a sit-on-top kayak. And I met him and I said, "I didn't think anybody else did this thing that I do." And he's like, "I didn't think anybody else did what I do." And we're like, did we just become best friends? Yup. So that was really the beginning of the sit on top, which is absolutely critical for safety for modern day kayak fishing. So I think it's cool that you took it to the next level after leaving Blue Water and all that to really jump in with Hobie. Before then, it was really just ocean kayak, and then that was your experience, right?
Yeah, we were pretty lucky. So I started working for Hobie. When was it? Can't remember now. 2004 or something like that. No, wait. 2009. That's when I started. So I had a friend, and he's going to be mad at me for mentioning his name, but his name's Vince Console, and he was the product manager at Hobie at the time. And we had been friends. He was a Solana Beach lifeguard and just a badass waterman, good friend of mine. And I went to college and was studying business administration and accounting, and I realized, like, the last year of my degree, I did not want to become an accountant. And I was working part-time at the tackle shop and at Ron Lane's store, Fast Lane Sailing and Kayaking, and I started guiding a little bit, and I know Trout guided way before me, but Vince and I went on a trip. I think we went to Puertecitos, which is just below San Felipe, and he's like, "I'm going to bring the kayaks this time," because we used to load 2 or 3 kayaks on my truck, and we'd drive down and camp out and just drink beer and catch corvina, and I think I went 0 for 12 on cabrilla.
Nice.
Like, big cabrillas just smoked me, but he caught like a nice 20-pounder, so we knew what they were eventually. But Vince was like, "You have to try this pedal drive system," and I was like, "Dude, I've been paddling forever. Like, my mentors all paddle, like, it's way faster, it's way more efficient. This thing's gonna break." And he's like, "Trust me." So we towed a trailer down there, and within 5 minutes of trying the pedal drive system, I was like, I can never paddle again.
It's a total game changer.
Yeah, and so that was back it was in the early 2000s when I tried it, and then Ron, I got a few boats from Ron and was guiding and taking people out, and then that's right when Vince was developing the Pro Angler 14. And so I got to try out this fiberglass plug at La Jolla and launch it through the surf. And we found a bunch of issues with it, which took a while for them to listen to us, you know, but, and some of them, they never listened to us at all. But anyways, so I was part of that. And then I finished college and working at Fastlane, and Ron put in a good word with the VP of sales, and she offered me a sales associate job. And I walked in like in a suit and tie, and she laughed at me, and she's like, we don't wear that around here, you know, like shorts and flip-flops.
And you're like,
fine.
this is where I want to work.
Yeah. And I was like ready for this big interview, and she's like, no, you have the job. And I was like, oh,
you're stoked.
Okay. Like dream job. Right.
Yeah.
What
And
year was that?
it was 2009. Yeah. So probably 15 years after you were.
That was right when I moved back from Oahu. So that's
Okay.
right. And we had just kind of reconnected. And I was like, wow, Morgie grew up. So,
Well, I think just talking about like the allure of kayak fishing is how accessible it is, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a ton of money and to go buy a skiff, and you can pretty much access, you know, all these inshore fisheries that you couldn't do from the beach, and you're watching these guys on their kayaks.
Move that mic a little closer.
You're watching these guys on their kayaks bring in, you know, yellows and sea bass, and you're like, damn, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
And then the pedal drive system changed that, and everyone's doing it now. I feel like 80% of the kayaks I see while we're out fishing are pedal drive kayaks, and it makes sense, right? Your hands are free, and they're so well developed now. The R&D, I know Trout was talking about this before we started talking. The R&D that's gone into all this stuff is just mental. And Ira and all his friends, they're all Groms, and they all love kayak fishing because they love catching bass, which is cool.
Yeah.
Like we got a couple Old Towns, and Ira's roommate is out once a week on the Old Town.
Awesome.
And he smokes them. And he's, you know, it seems easier. I used to like try and paddle around, and I would like have to put the paddle down, and then I'd start drifting away, and I was like trying to cast like backwards over my shoulder.
If you do it enough, like you can get really good at that.
I am the stubborn butthead that has never and will
You're
never,
old school. It's great.
Will never use the pedal. I've got this thing where like crooked under my arm, I get this paddle with my rod forward, backward. I mean,
the chicken dance.
It's just
chicken dance.
Chicken dance. Like I can like do that, like get bit and like grab a rear with my elbow, and
yeah. I mean,
do you feel special? Are you like, damn, anyone can
multitasking.
do this in a pedal kayak? But I got the. We were in Rancho last year, and Nate hooked a. We were like 200 feet off the beach, and Nate hooked a Dorado on a kayak.
Yeah. I lost it.
I would say, like, honestly,
I was on a paddleboard.
You were?
Oh, that's even better.
Were you really?
Yeah.
That's even better. Yeah, a lot of people do that.
Well,
They'll
dude, there were like
out.
40-pound jacks swimming around, and we're like, we gotta catch one of those.
jacks
Couldn't
go
catch
through
one.
when,
Couldn't even get a bite.
Their sardinas
Nate got a
push
bite or
through.
something.
You know.
Yeah.
Those jacks will come.
And dude, when we were down there, we were just like drifting on bait balls, and a friggin' humpback whale swam straight under me.
Believe it.
Well, I think like talking about all this, right? Like that's what kayak fishing is.
Yeah.
To me, it's like you can shore fish, you can boat fish, or you can float tube or kayak fish, and you can go and buy a kayak for a few $100 and get out on the water, and all you do is you spend the fuel in your car to get to the water, and then it's free after that, you know?
Here's the way I looked at it.
Yeah.
We started surfing. Like, we always fished. I've always fished since birth. But as a surfer, there's this whole
Came
thing.
out of the womb with a fishing rod.
Yep. There's this thing about when you go surf, it's the motion of putting your board in, putting your suit in, whatever, going to the beach, pulling the board out, going out and surfing, right? That is what I wanted to do with fishing. I wanted to be able to slide the kayak in the back of my truck, put the poles on top, put the rods on top, a little basket with all the stuff that you're going to need, drive to the beach, put in, catch your fish, and go home just like surfing. It takes a little more effort. Got to rinse off a couple more things, but for the most part, the accessibility, I think that would be the term.
When you're on the water,
the term to use is accessibility versus the boats where there's just so much involved, and you don't break down.
I think even the accessibility and the simplicity, right? Like when we go out on the skiff, we bring 4 or 5 rods each, and we're like, oh, and I think maybe sometimes it helps us and sometimes it hinders us because we're trying to figure out what we should be fishing. And then when you go out on a kayak, you have 2 rods,
I have like
maybe
17.
3.
Yeah, no,
Just
you're
kidding. No, but
wrong
I have
because
a-
this guy's an
Yeah,
animal.
like when I bass fish, I'll take.
Right.
People make fun of me, but if you look at like, so kayak fishing has become huge, right? It was the fastest growing segment of the fishing industry for many, many years when I worked at Hobie, and it's the same thing. You can do anything on a kayak that you can do on a boat. So there's guys with like a crankbait rod, a chatterbait rod, a jig rod, this, that,
Yeah.
a spinning rod, a drop shot, everything.
Then maybe I'm mistaken.
No, but so
It's all of
it's
the
like
above,
it's
really.
as simple as you want to make it.
Yeah.
Like Ron Lane, one of his funny sayings that I remember is like less is more, right? You take
Yeah.
sometimes you just want to take one rod and go have fun.
Yeah, and going back to the less is more thing, like when I think of kayak fishing, and I'm usually on a skiff or a boat, is that like when I think about even open ocean fishing versus inshore fishing, right? Like I know personally when I'm offshore, if I feel like I'm not in a good zone, I'm like out of there fucking quick, you know, and I'm on to the next area. When I'm fishing like an inshore area, it's kind of like I'm spending more time noticing all the subtleties going on around me, whether it's like a spot of puddling bait or just all the little things, right? And then that's translated on a kayak even more so.
Yeah.
Like on a kayak, because you have the limited mobility, it's kind of like you're working with what you got, whether it's gear or whether it's just how the fishing conditions are that day, and it really it forces you to focus that much more. And so in that regard, I think it's like it's really refined, honestly, because you have to pay so much attention.
I'd love for you guys actually to speak on, like, for our listeners who are wanting to get into kayak fishing.
Yeah.
I know Brian, Tim, our buddy you fish with all the time, he's like, oh yeah, Morgan was out here in his kayak last week and he was like, he saw yellowtail breezing all over, and maybe like they're scared of our skiff, and in a kayak you're silent, and maybe not so much they're
like
they're gonna
white
swim right
sea
next to
bass
you.
That's
for
how
sure.
the white sea bass
for
work.
sure.
Right, and so maybe it's an advantage, and I think for people listening who either are experienced kayak fishermen, novice, or wanting to get into it, like some tips on like targeting these game fish. You guys are catching proper pelagics out of kayaks, which is awesome, and maybe some like insight into how you approach it differently on a kayak than you would if you were fishing on a skiff.
Going back, I'll incorporate that, but it also does have to do with gear. And so for me, it was always like right in the middle, which would be a fly line rig for live bait, an iron, some type of casting lure, a bottom rig, and a sabiki rig. Right. I would always want to have bait, so you never know if you're going to run out of bait or whatever they're breezing through. So the sabiki to always have live bait, something where pelagics are on top. Sometimes you get marks on the bottom, and sometimes you want to throw something. And as far as kayak fishing goes now, like we were saying before, there used to not be that many people on the water. I would actually find your own water. It doesn't have to be the MPA definitely made it a little more restrictive, but if you're okay with going to Baja or going somewhere that has less impact, there's places all over San Diego still. As long as you can beach launch, you can be alone. And I actually feel like kayak fishing is plateaued. When we started, it was like just like going off, and there was message boards, and there was the guides, and there was the tours, and then there was the writing and the magazines and the blogs, and it's still popular, but now I feel like it's kind of plateaued, where you could pick any day and really still be alone if you really wanted to, because most of the boats are, if they're not offshore, they're relatively close to where they're launching out of. So there's a certain area where it's far enough where these boats, they're not going to go there because it's too far, and then you can still launch and make it there from the kayak, right? I would say, going back to the beginning when we first started doing the classes and the trips and guided tours, it was honestly stressing safety. It's really important to know that, to know how to launch, to know how to land, to know how to self-rescue. That's number one. being comfortable.
Always
on the kayak.
wear a life jacket.
PFDs.
Yeah.
But really, if you're going to go kayak fishing, but you've never been on a kayak, go on the kayak first. See if you can even
go on
balance on the kayak.
on some calm water
Like,
too.
for
you
real.
know, like
In the pool. Take that thing out in the pool, babe.
I don't know
lake
about that.
or
Go in
like-
the bay. Go fish in the bay.
Yeah,
The bay, right? Go start in the,
the
bay.
bays are
I
awesome.
started
Yeah.
in the
for
pool.
But
Yeah.
really,
Started in the
be
pool.
safe. I mean, we've done so many self rescues. We've had
You
days
learn how
that
to
were
swim.
trash just because we're out fishing, and then somebody that shouldn't have been out there, hoolies, and they flip, and then you're like, okay, now I'm spending my whole day like getting this guy back in and whatever. So just be comfortable, be safe, get to know your kayak, test a kayak. Places like Fastlane, OEX, all these, they let you demo these boats. There's demo days. Go paddle these boats. If you're gonna kayak fish, find the one that's right for you. Figure out what water you're gonna fish. If you're gonna be a bay guy, you can have a bigger boat. It's no big deal. If you're gonna go offshore, you want something with a more narrow beam. Invest in a rudder system, maybe. More safety. Handheld radio. Don't go out. A cell phone. Don't bring your cell. Bring your cell phone. Put it in your bag. You want a submersible handheld radio.
Lanyard your cell phone as well. I've lost like 3 in the ocean.
Go with a friend.
Yeah.
Go with a friend, and if you
Yeah,
go
always-
solo,
that is a good-
let people know where you're gonna go.
Like, I want to reiterate that. Like, go with a buddy. A buddy system's a good thing, because if you do flip or you have a heart attack or something, like, if you're by yourself, you're done. You can get back on your kayak and stuff like that, but having a buddy with you is a huge thing. But yeah, like going back on the tips, for me, when I go ocean fishing, depending on what I'm targeting, like if I'm going calico bass fishing or just want to go out for a few hours and go hit the reefs or the kelp beds, I'll take one rod sometimes. If I'm going to La Jolla to spend all day, I'll take a similar setup to what Adam was saying. And then if I go to the bay, it's 1 or 2 rods, or how, like the main thing is it's like we have all this water that's available to you, and you can get out there on a kayak and go have like so much fun,
Yeah, and how much... another thing too, going back to what Trout was saying about find your own water, is just like, as someone who grew up fishing in San Diego most of my life, all my life, there's so much coastline with no boats and no one kayak fishing that has the same reef, the same amount of bait on a given day. Like, there's fish in those areas, but because like certain regions have been popularized and people just know, oh, there's yellowtail there, there's so much area that doesn't get explored, and like that's prime time fishery when you own a kayak, right? Is you can get in quick and get out of the water quick and kind of like see it more as an adventure and exploratory mission versus just like, I'm gonna go where everyone else is going because one person caught a fish here yesterday.
And I think a good way to understand that is to just go dive or even just snorkel our local waters. Like like wherever I surf, sometimes I'll just go out and there's no waves, we'll just put on some fins and kick out. And I've seen yellowtail in 8 feet of water.
Me too.
There's
El
just
Nino saw schools of hundreds of yellowtail in like 6 feet of water.
But it is definitely the blind leading the blind. I will give La Jolla a little extra added. It's definitely fishy because you have the point and
canyon,
the currents and the canyon and the fish pushing out.
No, there's no fish there anymore.
Probably not.
There's not. You shouldn't.
Morgan Connor.
There's fish there, but they're like, oh, that's a yo-yo arm.
Right, exactly.
That I swear, dude, they know. They know what all these baits
They
are.
let their guard down eventually.
Yeah.
But
that's
whenever I'm not there.
But that's really, guys, why you learn to beach launch, practice. Like it's.
But that's also a reason to go travel and explore. Like you guys have done so much in Baja. Morgan got to kayak fish in Mag Bay.
Yeah.
Like what a dream, dude.
Yeah. I was super lucky with the travel with Hobie.
You did the offshore scene and you did the mangroves. Morgan, if you haven't seen him, Morgan writes kayak articles for us. You should definitely check him out. They're really cool.
Yeah.
And he wrote one on Mag Bay and targeting, both offshore marlin and also in the mangroves there, like Corvina and the golden trevallies.
Yeah,
So
there's so
Palomettas.
much water to access on kayaks, you know. And
That's some of it's not ideal to be in a skiff. It's
Yeah,
just better
Or
to
a
be
Viking.
or a 60-foot Viking. Like it's not accessible.
Boiler rocks,
yeah,
the number one. Being able to paddle in
sure.
and being a couple feet from a boiler rock where you're literally pitching and letting it flutter down and
Yeah.
not worrying about your motor or the boat or having to back out or if the engine cuts or whatever.
The one thing you can't pull as hard on a 20-pound cabrilla in a kayak as you can in a skiff.
Or a Pargo.
no, but unless you have a pedal drive with reverse,
There-
right?
oh.
And
Yeah.
then you just
I didn't even think of that.
Like in Mag Bay in the mangroves, the first big fish I hooked in there, like completely surprised me and just like took me into the mangroves and broke me off. And the next one, as soon as it hit, I was just like pedaling my butt off with like lock drag, holding the rod and like towed it away from there. So if you and like you were talking about boiler rocks, we did a mothership trip on the Qualifier 105 back in the day, like a fish trap trip with Barry Breitenberg.
Yep.
And forget the name of the place that we fished, but it was like halfway down Baja, Sac Reef. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And they launched.
Big
It was
black
a
sea
skiff.
bass
Yeah, it was a
and-
skiff
yeah,
trip,
dude, that
and there
place
was
is
some
nuts.
surf. But my friend Jared Lane and I got into an area where the skiffs couldn't even get to, and we were catching like 6 and 8 pound calicos one after the other.
No way.
You know,
Wow.
and I think a lot of the days that we were on that trip, because we went to Cedros Island and everything, we pretty much outfished the skiffs on our.
I was just gonna
kayaks
ask
a
you if either
lot,
of you would have
you
been
know?
to
I
done
actually
the Cedros
camped
deal.
there. I drove the kayaks down, camped on the mainland, and paddled out.
To
Wow.
Cedros?
No,
Oh,
That whole reef area.
but I've
Yeah.
done that area. There's some
You're
stuff.
gnarly, Trout.
There's some stuff I'm not going to talk about because
Yeah.
like Baja's not a secret, but there's definitely some places.
No, for
where
sure.
I'm just not going to talk about it.
Go explore. Go explore. Go
There
You
you
need the
go.
explore.
password.
And that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
we did. Is seriously, I've driven to the tip and back multiple times on both sides. You know, just as a kid surfing, and then as I started fishing more, and then kayak fishing, we pinpointed them, and it's just been insane. Thinking back on all the different spots that we've hit on both sides of the Baja Peninsula, and there's so much, and it's and then you get different weather. You get cold water, warm water, hot water, all these different fish. I mean, grouper, pargo, snapper, like it just
Yeah.
goes on. The inshore, like we've all caught so many tuna, we've caught so many yellowtail, we've caught so many mahi. I'm back to like this inshore, like these beastie, toothy, gnarly things that are gonna kind of kick your ass.
What are your guys' trophy catches in your kayaks? Have you done bluefin? I know Howie tried or
I've caught yellowfin
off a
but
kayak?
not bluefin. I've been to Panama and kayak fished, Australia, the Netherlands,
Roosters?
all over. Roosters, tons of roosters on the kayak, like up to maybe like 60 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, I went to Panama and I had this incredible first trip down there where I caught over 50 fish a day, like to where I was changing the handle on my spinning reel from the left to right side because my arms were getting so burned. And then I caught
knuckles for that. That's kind of
it was nice. But we're catching
my arm.
yeah, every point we would go to, I would have 3 or 4 big Cubera snapper come
Yeah.
up underneath the popper, and I kept on I don't know why they weren't getting the hooks in their mouth, but eventually I caught one that was like barely hooked by the skin of its lip, and it was like a 50-pound. And then catching roosters down there on poppers. I had been to like Rancho Linero and stuff and trolled caballitos and caught, and then I was like, I don't even want to catch roosters off the kayak on live bait anymore. It's boring compared to like the popper bites. Like Panama is sick.
Yeah.
But aside from that, like getting back to here, you can explore like crazy with the kayak. You can throw it on top of your car and drive to Baja, and go spend a week and find a place where you won't see another person all day long and catch cabrilla and corvina and whatever. But right here, there's like all of North County. That was my playground, like my learning grounds, launching through the surf, fishing off Cardiff, Carlsbad,
Is that where you
Oceanside.
guided mainly when you were guiding?
No, I mainly got it off La Jolla.
Okay.
But when I would go fish, a lot of the time I just want to be away from people as La Jolla got more and more crowded. And even with the crowds, like, it's really not bad. If people are sitting in an area, you can always go work the outskirts or whatever. Or sometimes, like, when the squid would come in and spawn, there would be 80 boats and 100 kayakers, and a school would swim through, and 80% of the
everyone
people
would be dead.
That
it's
actually
incredible.
reminds me of something that I completely forgot about. So as you get into your 50s, you'll start forgetting all kinds of shit too. So, but literally, I was looking one day, and I'm like, "What is that out there?" And it's like in the Encinitas area, whatever. And nobody fishes there. It's like they're either gonna do Oceanside or Carlsbad, or they're gonna go down to like Solana or Del Mar or whatever. And it's like those are squid boats.
Yeah.
And I went home that night, and my buddy Dave we're like, we're out there tomorrow. Like, the squid boats are out there. There's squid nests. Like, this is stupid not to try. It was way out there. So we paddle out there, and there's 2 party boats out there, and we pull up, and I see a guy look over, and he was right there, and I had binos, and I'm looking around, and I look on the boat, and this guy's like, what the fuck? like, what are these guys doing? It was like miles out.
Was it in the dark? Or was it during the
No,
day?
it was early. Like,
Okay.
we launched, it was pretty dark, but it was so far by the time we got out there, it was like more, just early morning. And on the way out, there was a couple max boiling. I made some baits, and then I had a yo-yo. And we get out there, I drop the mackerel to the bottom, put it in the rod holder, put it in gear, drop the yo-yo to the bottom, hits the bottom, 2 cranks up, bit, and then my live bait goes bzzz, and I've got the
Nice.
double reel, holster, go, reel, holster, back and forth, gaff one, gaff the other, paddle in, and I look at the boat, I'm like, good fishing with you guys, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
And it was just one of those walk-offs where, we get skunked all the time.
You didn't even catch a
Let's
fish on
not-
squid. You caught on a yo-yo and a
yo-yo
mackerel?
and a mackerel. And it was literally like a couple minutes, and I paddled all the way back in with these
You're stoked.
25-pound yellowtail. And the people on the boat were just baffled. And that's the cool thing about kayak fishing, is it's just, you're the odd bird, It's just a different way.
It's
and
almost
exciting.
more impressive. It's like, man, this guy just came in with a sea bass and a yellow on his kayak, and
Well, you're your own captain too, right?
For sure.
Sometimes you get on the boat with someone and you're like, I want to go right, but they go left, and you're like, oh man, I wonder what would have happened if we had gone right. And with the kayak, you just go where everything that happens. If you don't catch fish, it's your fault. Or if you catch fish, you're like, sweet, I made like the right decision or whatever, and then as kayaks have evolved, like and fish, adding fish finders and live bait.
I was gonna say,
tanks
how important are electronics, especially for this inshore
depending
stuff?
on what you're doing, they're pretty important.
Yeah.
And having the GPS, like Trout was talking about safety stuff, like there's several times when I was younger where the fog rolled in, and I would hear the cars on the shore, and I'd be like, oh, shore's that way.
Right.
And then I'd look at my GPS, I'm like, no, shore's that way.
Right.
And so just being safe, like taking a compass, having a fish finder or a handheld
Lights,
GPS.
reflective things, like whatever.
Yeah.
Take it all,
Yeah, I got to say thanks to my dad for like drilling that into me, because he was an old sailor,
Well, that was when Spike and I were working together, and we built this class. Like, it was literally so that it was consistent. We didn't want to shoot from the hip every time. We would spend an hour and a half on shore before we let a client ever even touch the water, talking about launching, landing, self-rescue, safety, talking about the drag. Some people weren't good fishermen, so they didn't even know about how to set a drag. I mean, it was pretty intense. So we really went through all that, and then we went through all the safety devices. Back then, it was so stripped down and basic. There was like half of what there was now.
Get your PFD and let's go.
Yeah, right. But
Did you ask them if they could swim?
that was we'd ask those for sure. But shout out to Spike for really putting safety first and not just like taking people on a drag and say, hey,
when you're responsible for someone else's, yeah.
So that was a neat part. And then, we do those introductory classes and clinics. And then once we'd get these intermediate to advanced ones, that's when we started doing the Baja trips. I was the first person to ever take people from here down across the border and do these kayak fishing trips. Like we'd take down 12 at a time, post up, camp, do whatever, fish all day, arrange things with the local restaurants. They'd clean the fish. It was like fish, tortillas, beans, rice, salsa, beer, tequila, $20
How come
a head.
I never got invited?
You were like 12 years old, bro.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Trout's a really talented chef. Is that how you got started in the whole cooking game? Is just as a part of your kayak guiding, and you had all this fish, and
yeah, actually,
what are you gonna do with it?
It really was, because we would go down. It was first our group. We called each other. It was like the usual suspects. That was our group. It was like a handful of guys, to the point where after the message boards and everything, we're like, why are we giving everything away? And we created this own private email chain where it was just us, and then we started traveling together. And these guys were like special ops kayak anglers. Like we did damage to fisheries.
You guys were a gang.
So we fished both sides of the Baja Peninsula, and as much as I want to say I did a lot, some of these guys were better fishermen or better at R&D, better at outfitting their kayaks. Like together we all shared information. One of the guys in the suspects, Mo, he invented the kayak tank, which was the first live bait tank that was underneath the kayak. It was, so you have the sit on top kayak that's hollow, so you'd screw the hatch, and inside he created this bladder system where he took a dry bag and had it so that the bladder would fill up with water, and then it was plumbed through with a battery, with an on-off, and so smart, he did a timer switch, so it saved the battery. You don't have to have it running the whole time, so it'd be on for a few seconds, off for a few seconds. You could keep 20 mackerel alive in this thing, and your center of gravity was balanced. So these are the types of things that were going on. Obviously the starters were the rod holders, the paddle clips, the crude tanks. I have pictures of my friend that literally had like an aquarium bungee corded to the front of his kayak, like had a plastic tub with bungee cords. He'd fill it up, and there's mackerel swimming around.
This is live well.
I should have brought the picture.
So
it was insane.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What year did you first start using a fish finder?
So the first time, I'm gonna go with 96-ish, 97.
And it was like a black and white little tiny one.
So it was the Humminbird 100DX, and it was like $79.
Yeah.
It looked like you were playing a game of Pong.
It was it was Space Invaders.
It's like you might be in 70 feet of water right now.
You could tell the depth, and that was about it, right?
Yeah.
But you're like, sweet, I'm
below
in
you.
70 feet,
And I'll never forget, I was fishing, and something happened. One of the wires got jacked up, and it made like 20 fish pop up every, I don't know, minute.
Like fake fish.
And I'm losing
the fish
my
symbols.
mind.
Yeah,
the fish symbols. like seriously, like a video game. And after like a half hour of the exact same amount of fish come up at the exact sound time, I'm like, oh, this thing's broken.
No, you're on the demo mode still.
So now there's like the Chirp 7 and like all these things that are just like the temperature and the GPS built in and all these things, and they're great. I honestly don't go there. I've kept mine like in the middle of the road. Like I said, I do 4 rods. I do a middle of the road sonar. I do the kayak tank. I bring a hand gaff. I bring a bowline in case I need to tie up for safety. I bring bungees as like a shock. I always bring a sea anchor, a drift chute. Looks like a parachute. So I throw that out. So if you're fishing for halibut and the wind picks up, you want to go slow. You don't want to just blow over the top of all these fish. So deploy your drift chute, and it will cut your time in half, and you have the bungee for the shock, so that if a big swell comes, it doesn't flip you over. These are all things that happen by us flipping over.
Yeah,
Trial and error.
Repeatedly. Like, what do we need to do to not flip over?
Yeah, and if you go to like a store like Pure Water Sports or OEX or Fastlane, they're gonna have kayak fishing experts that work there. You know, they have knowledge. They've sold fishing kayaks for many years, and they can help rig your kayak up how you want it. My advice would be start simple. You don't need a lot, you know, and start off on calm water. And I have a bunch of friends that all they do is like fish the bays, or they fish lakes, you know, like San Vicente Reservoir or Lake Hodges or whatever, El Cap, or they go up into the Sierras and fish for trout. Like that's super fun on the kayaks, you know. There's so many things you can do with a kayak, but those stores, if you wanted to put a fish finder on, they'll install the transducer and get you the right battery to power it up. And then there's kayak motors now, which like, I don't know if it's because I'm getting closer to 40 trout that my belly's growing, or because I'm not kayak fishing as much anymore.
You're a new dad.
I'm a new dad.
Honestly,
yeah. But you know, to me, a kayak's like a piece of like it's like a fishing rod, right? You can't just have one fishing rod that catches everything from a bluegill to a marlin. And a kayak's like a tool to access different water, or like it's like a different surfboard that you surf on a big or small day. Like I might use my Pro Angler if I'm fishing a lake, and I might use a narrower, faster kayak if I'm surf launching in Cardiff or Carlsbad or Oceanside. And so I don't know, like there's people that I know that have 3 or 4 different kayaks for different uses. They're rigged in different ways. You know, one's like
I do one for each decade.
Yeah.
90s.
Do you think there's a limit?
2010s.
Like, do you think you could, as far as like the fish you're catching, you talked about pulling on a 50-pound cubera, like that's a proper fish, but this like bluefin, like do you think you could catch a 100-pound bluefin in a kayak?
I'm gonna hit on that actually.
Yeah,
because,
go ahead. I'm interested. I'd love to see it too.
I also lived on Oahu, and I know this is a regional show, and we're talking about San Diego and Baja and stuff, but shout out to the Hawaii boys. I mean, these guys are catching billfish, huge billfish, huge uluas, just onos, like mahis, like everything. You know, living out there was a privilege because, number one, it was a different fishery, so I have the ability to get all these species that I couldn't get inshore here. And number two, it's cool because they have a completely different way of kayak fishing. So there's no real right or wrong way. You know, I go out and these guys are using kages, which are like spears, instead of using gaffs, or they'll do both. And a lot of big tuna out there. These guys are getting
like tuna close to 200 pounds
big,
that I've
big
seen.
ahis. There's
on like thin kayaks too, where I'm like, dude, where are you gonna put that thing? You know?
So like my
I
friend,
didn't even think about that.
So like my friend Isaac Brummage, he started Aqua Hunters out there, which was, you know, kind of, he started by watching us, like, you know, Spike, and he watched his video and was inspired, and then turned it into that fishery. And it doesn't have to just be Hawaii now. It could be mainland Mexico. It can be Europe. There's guys sending videos in from like New Zealand catching their version of the yellowtail, these big kingies that are like 90 pounds. I mean, it's really cool that it has gone global. East Coast, there are people that are targeting bluefin, getting jumbos. I don't know what the record is. I don't know, but
large.
It's been super impressive going from when we were just psyching on calicos and barracudas.
I remember
and then
when I first started, I caught a mackerel, and I was like, wow, like, this is such a cool fish. And then
I still do that when I catch mackerel.
Nate and I go out, have a day we harvest whitefish. It's the most fun day.
For sure.
A half day of just harvesting.
You bid every drop.
That's the thing about fishing though, and like whether you're in a kayak or a skiff, you know, like ultimately we're out there to have fun, and you know, if we're catching fish, we're stoked. Whether it's, you know, obviously we want to catch that big trophy fish, but dude, if you're have the ability to go out and catch some stuff, you're stoked and you're having a good day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You look at like some of the long range boat captains, and it's like you ask them what their favorite thing to do is, and they're like, oh yeah, I like hiking into the backcountry and I catch, you know, 6 to 12 inch trout.
Yeah.
And it's and I think with a kayak, you have this like sense of adventure every time that you launch, and you can just go out there and you can try different things, and it's just so fun, man. Like this whole podcast amping me to want to start kayak fishing more again.
One of the most fun things that I would do teaching was I did a Father's Day clinic, and I would get a bunch of tandem kayaks and a bunch of dads and little kids. And when I say little, I mean there's some like 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. And it was rad because a lot were girls. And there's not a lot of females in the industry. It's building. It's like, it's rad seeing more women starting to fish. And seeing these kids, we just go in the bay, and it would be spotties, sandies, sand bass.
It's the time of their life.
And mackerel. And no more smiles will ever be seen. And talk about not caring about catching a big fish, just watching little kids, especially little girls, get bit with their dad on Father's Day. Like, that's good stuff. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, on the other side of that, I still have like this dream thing I want to do trout, and so I have a boat, and I kind of wanted to mention this, but when I fish La Jolla, I live in South Oceanside. I probably spend like $100 that day because it's like a third of a tank towing down to Mission Bay, 10 miles out there. I drive around for hours looking for schools of yellowtail, and then I drive 10 miles back, and then I got to clean the boat, and sometimes I got a wheel bearing going out, or I got to do this or that, and I'm like, dang, like maybe I should have just loaded the kayak up, you know? I forgot where I was going with this now.
It's just as easy to catch zero fish in a skiff as it is in a kayak.
Yeah, exactly. No, and another nice thing's like exercise, right?
Yeah,
like
man.
I honestly, I used to kayak fish like every weekend, and for me an average day was pedaling anywhere from 6 to 15 miles.
Right.
And I felt like I was in a lot better shape because I was active, you know?
Yeah.
And I like that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Earlier you guys mentioned, you know, how quickly kayak fishing was growing and all this R&D and these huge developments in the kayak space. And it's to a point now where I feel like they got it pretty dialed in, right? Yeah. In your guys' opinion, though, like what's next? What's still to come in the kayak game? You know, it's growing, it's huge. There's a very niche community of older kayak fishermen who I feel like are very hush, like you mentioned, which is cool. Like, keep your secrets, you know. But at the same time, like, we all want to share this love of fishing we have with one another, and there's so many younger people, boys and girls, getting into the sport. What's next though? Like, what is still left to?
On that. I'll let you go first.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that kayaking, like, you can make it as complicated as you want. Like, I know I have friends with like a Newport Vessels or a Torpedo on the back of their kayak, an electric motor, which is like equivalent to a 1 or 2 horsepower gasoline motor. It's for getting from point A to point B. And then on that same kayak, they'll have a trolling motor on the front, right? And then they have a pedal drive as well. But that kayak weighs like 200 pounds, and it's pretty complicated. It takes a lot to set up. And at that point, I'm like, why don't you just buy an aluminum skiff or something? And,
that's not kayak fishing.
Yeah. So, and like, when I worked at Hobie, we ran the only bass fishing tournament series. It was mainly in the Central and East Coast, called the Hobie Bass Open Series. And to this day, they still don't allow motors in our tournaments. But like every single other bass fishing tournament series allows motors, and like that's not kayak fishing.
No, I don't think it's kayak fishing.
Yeah, like a 14-foot pro angler with a trolling motor on the front.
Plus, kayaks going like 5 knots looks so funny with an engine down.
Yeah,
I go 5 knots in my kayak because I'm getting towed by a huge freaking fish.
To me, it's lost its like its pull for me as kayak fishing, but it is where the industry's been going, and companies like Old Town and I'm not bagging on using a motor on your kayak. If that's what you want to do it, you know, but for me, like, the human powered aspect of it's what I enjoy. So
I think I think there's something to be said though for if you want to fish somewhere that's further away from your launch point. I don't see an issue with using that motor to get there.
Yep.
And then go under self power for the fish duration of your fishing, and then use it for the long trek back. Like, that's probably
and the thing about like Newport specifically
Yeah.
is, you know, a lot of time like you can put those things on small inflatables too.
Oh yeah.
So like yeah, I don't know, just getting point
I
A
do
point
have
A to
a
point B,
motor.
man.
I
you
do
know?
have a motor on one of my kayaks, a Newport vessels, that, because like if you fish La Jolla, it's like 3 miles
I'm
to
not
get up
talking to you anymore.
to the fishing grounds, and it's after a while you're like, I don't want to pedal. Or
Especially if you're out there all day.
3 miles
Yeah.
there and then fish all day.
No, I think for
And
that
then
stuff it's a good call.
It's nice, you know. That's 6 miles where you can sit back and relax. It's so nice.
Here's the thing. There's no
Here we go.
rules. Everybody
there's
can.
no rules.
Everyone can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Like, whether it's an inflatable or a John boat, so to speak, one of the bigger kayaks, people want to do it. That's fine. It's like we all have our thing. Just like he'll do the pedal and I'll paddle, and some people can do a motor. But, you know, at the end of the day, if we're really talking about kayak fishing, I go back to the basics, which is where it all started. Like, we're kind of like
Your chicken
laughing
wing pedal, yeah.
I'm talking about like Pacific Islanders and
Uh,
Polynesians
way
and,
back
and
when.
the
Yep.
Aleuts and, like, you know, the OGs, and they had craft that they would paddle with, you know, human power, and they would fish, and that's kind of what I modeled, what I envisioned after. And I've always chosen the longer, more narrow beam boats so I can go farther, troll faster, troll Rapalas effectively.
Troll hard.
Now, you know, I feel like it's kind of a young man's game. If I'm going to do it, I'd like to like soak a nice mackerel while I sit there with a sandwich. But
Perfect.
yeah, it's, like I said, to each his own. Like, really, there's no rules, and I would never say you can't use pedals or a motor. Like, everyone's got their own jam. But if we're talking about kayak fishing, you know, I go back to thinking about really the very beginning and starting with that crappy little kayak and almost dying in Baja. And I actually wrote a story about it. Paul Leibowitz called me, and Paul's a great guy in the industry and writing, and supported kayak fishing and loves kayak fishing and is a great writer and editor. And I wrote multiple articles for him, and one of them was, you know, you got to humble yourself. I openly wrote this thing about me almost dying, and it's entertaining. It grasps you, and it says, like, okay, when we're out there, like at the end, it's like literally sink or swim, versus when you're in a boat, it's a little more chill and relaxing, and especially a cattle boat where you don't have to worry about anything except when your cheeseburger is going to come up, right?
Right.
So I think that's the part of the lure of this sport, is it's a little riskier, it's a little harder. You've got to be on your game. You got to watch the weather, you have to watch the wind, you have to watch the swell. Weather changes quickly, you know. So I don't know, I just feel like it's more involved, and to me that's the lure of the sport.
Almost like fly fishing is to conventional fishing or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I
It's
would
just
say
like-
that's a pretty accurate
Yeah.
description.
And like just another tool to go have fun and target.
Exactly.
Because I've said this a lot of times to friends, and I'm like, you know, there were fishermen that wanted to get out there, and there were kayakers, and so the fishermen used what the kayakers had and had to learn how to be, or they were kayakers who fished that really had skills in like maneuvering a kayak extremely well with their paddle. And now if you're a fisherman, it's just a vessel that you can get as a tool to get out there. There's a lot more options.
Well, let's
out
talk
there.
about the things aside from fishing that are out there, and like classes and clinics and trips that I did before too. I used to do a lobster hoop netting clinic, and I mean, this was back when like people still, fish heads were like they were going to throw them in the trash, and I'd go to the fish market and all the local shops, and I'd collect all the salmon heads and salmon carcasses, and then I'd have like 7 people go, and I'd show people how to tie in, get the bait in there, and then we would get our glow sticks and all that, and we'd have our measuring devices, and we'd paddle out at dusk, and then as soon as the sun went down, we would go, and everyone would limit. And that's another memory I just totally forgot about.
Lobstering and crabbing off kayaks is super fun.
And then I just flew up into the Santa Rosa airport, and I did the Dungeness crab opener from my kayak.
The most delicious
with Spike.
thing in the world.
I've lobstered once off a
insane.
kayak. That's dedication. That's hard. We were fishing like last week, and we saw a bunch of kayakers.
There's a lot of people that do it. So
it's gnarly. It's hard work. It's really hard work.
Another thing with like accessibility with the kayaks is you'd have the commercial guys setting their traps, and then you would have guys on skiffs or boats setting their traps. You'd have divers, and I would dive a lot for lobsters, free dive, and I would find these ledges sometimes that I couldn't get to. Not even a scuba diver could get to, and I'd be like, oh, that's in like 6 feet of water. I'll wait for a day when there's no surf, and there were times I would drop my trap, and at nighttime I could see my trap on the bottom, and I would paddle away and drop 4 more traps, and by the time the 5th one was dropped, I would come back over and pull out like four big fat lobsters.
Now part of that is that now the commercial guys have absolutely whacked the population, and so all these places where it was as easy as by the time you loaded your last trap and came back it'd be full, now they're just shorts.
But he's just even talking about the like being able to access these areas that you can't get to in a skiff.
Again, it goes back to just leveraging the areas that are coastal in San Diego that all the boats don't hit frequently. There's lobsters everywhere. I free dive too, and I'm not super serious about it from an open ocean perspective, but along the coast I love to do it, and there's so many, like you said, ledges, caves, holes. You can't get an arm all the way in there, but if you mark it somehow and you can return back, you're gonna definitely come home with lobster.
I have a funny story about lobstering at night. My friend Brian Reagan and I were out one night, and these were on paddle kayaks on our Cobras back in the day, and so we would same thing, get tuna heads, zip tie 'em on the beach, like we'd lay out all our nets. I think we might have flipped. Like there was nights where we flipped like 4 or 5 times, tied everything.
If you stack them up, like we would bring a lot. So if you stack them up, I mean,
like Fletcher's Cove, low tide, 6 foot surf, but it's the opening night. We got to go lobster. We would paddle north or south from there. But anyways, we would catch some cool stuff in the traps too, like surf perch or like a calico, and we'd catch these big crabs. Well, that's part of my story. So he's pulling up this trap, and we have board shorts on. We call Brian's nickname is Bear because he'll go out in board shorts in the middle of winter and he doesn't get cold. He's a crazy man. So I remember him pulling up this hoop net, and he lays it between his legs, like rests the outer rim on his knees, and so so the lobsters can't get out. And this eel, there's 2 eels in there, and one of them goes through one of the holes down his board short leg and right into his crotch area, and he's freaking out, like almost flips his kayak.
Liked it.
Gets the eel out.
Oh no! But, no, there's an eel in my shorts.
Yeah, he also when before, like with the kayaks and stuff, we would fish off our boards also, and we used to troll for thresher sharks with holding the rod in our mouth, trolling a CD18 or Impala, and he caught one in his mouth, like a 80 or 90 pound thresher, hooked it, and then got towed around.
Did he put it on his lap afterwards?
Yeah, we lifted it up and then let it go.
Rhino and I used to do thresher clinics. Rhino, he's more up north, like even north of LA, more like Ventura area.
It was good thresher shark fishing up there.
He was the master at the threshers. I mean, he had it down. He would have the buoys and tie them off and everything, and he came down once, and it was, I couldn't believe it. We had 7 people, and we went 7 for 7. Everyone got a thresher. We released, but like that's what I'm saying. The different things, the crabbing, the lobsters, threshers, on top of just regular fishing. Was
Yeah,
good.
like Jim Salazar, you know Jim. He goes up into like the Mammoth area and he drops what do you call those things? Crawfish pots, and he gets his crawfish for his little crawfish broil, and then he catches a couple trout, and he'll go up there for like a couple months at a time and camp out with his kayak and just has a great all time. But that's what I love about a kayak. You know, you can take it on a camping trip, or I've flown to Cabo with inflatable kayaks before.
That's cool.
That you check, you know, in your luggage.
That's really cool.
And you get to Cabo, and maybe you have to pay $70 or $100 for an oversized bag, but you have a kayak with you for the whole trip, and you know, caught fish that way too.
That's so my friend JJ, that you know, his mom was the one that kind of started this.
You really should have.
Like honestly, like he and I still talk about that. Like we could go anywhere we want. Those inflatable kayaks, the development of those things are bulletproof, lightweight, and that's one of those things where there's waters that have not been fished that, I mean, that would be the ultimate.
That's another thing.
Great Barrier Reef.
Oh my gosh.
Would be rad on a kayak.
Well, that's what I was thinking of, is there are outfitters now that have kayaks like in Panama or Cedros Island,
right?
Or Mag Bay that I went to. Like, if you guys do some research, you can find these outfitters where basically you pay your fee for your accommodation and your fishing, and you show up and they have 6 or 8 kayaks,
right?
And they'll take you out and mothership you out to the spots, and it's a pretty cool trip.
And if you do that, I would still try to get your learning curve dialed before you go there. I mean, there's all the writing articles. Like before it was like so huge with the message boards and everything, like that's what I did is I wrote. I did a quarterly newsletter. I wrote for the fishing magazines, blogs, whatever. Spike did the video. Now there's YouTube and all this stuff. You could find some of my original articles. If you go to the library, there's microfiche and microfilm with the wheel. You guys remember that?
No.
God, you're so
what are you talking about, Trout?
Microfiche.
I'm just kidding. No, but that's like some of them are quite old, but you know, I think the older ones are some of the better ones because of the simplicity.
Yeah.
It talks about the basics. It talks about the safety, terminal tackle, you know, what you need, what you don't need, the gear, launching, landing, all that, and just start with like literally a tackle flat, one rod, one setup, safety stuff, and just drop cut squid, pothole in the kelp beds for calicos and sheep's head and all that, and then just work your way up.
Yeah, you'll have a blast.
Yeah, but you know, I've recently gone to new places like mainland Mexico. I was shocked. Like, yeah, they have kayaks right there with rod holders. I'm like, oh.
It's just commonplace now.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, internet solves everything. I mean, it kind of takes a little bit of the excitement out and, you know, having to really dig, but it does make it nice so that if you go somewhere, you have a plan.
Yeah.
You have a plan.
For sure.
And you guys have gone to more places than we have.
We're lucky. No, we definitely have not.
We're
getting there.
Ricky out for sure, and if Nate wants to come, and maybe you want to, but
do you know that none of you guys have ever invited me fishing?
That's not true.
I don't
You're
know
busy.
if that's
You're
true.
busy. If you guys have a dying need to say
okay?
anything else, we got to wrap it up soon. But I want to make sure you guys get all your thoughts across.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think I'm very keen to go out on the kayak, and
I am too.
Just
I wanna
experience
do an offshore kayak
experience
day.
something different. Nate and I have been talking about.
mothership.
Yeah, Nate and I have been
for
talking about
tuna,
setting up a
or out to
mothership.
San Clemente Island or something.
Either,
Well,
dude,
if it's like a
or.
plunker, bluefin, yellowfin bite, it would be cool.
You know what we've been
just,
talking about
like-
too? Like, sorry to cut you
Oh,
off.
no, go for it.
Dude, when we are just rolling up on foam spot after foam spot during the summer, and just they're down as soon as we get there.
Yeah.
Is it the boat?
No,
Like-
they'll go down with the kayak too.
Really?
Even the little, because I've done it, and even the little hull slap of the like. I think it's just the fish sometimes, but
Yeah.
But imagine being in a if on a good day
Yeah.
when they're
Yeah,
when they're
when
going
they're
gnarly,
staying
like,
up.
dude.
Oh,
Imagine
yeah.
just being in the middle of a foam spot in a kayak. That's
and some of the experiences that we've had, like balls of anchovy underneath us with 20-pound yellowtail crushing anchovy underneath your kayak. You know, like stuff that you see on the kayak, whales and
it's a different experience than if you're in a boat.
It's so fun. Crazy whale experiences.
Yeah.
I think the craziest thing that's ever happened, well, there's been a lot. Sharks, obviously, tiger sharks, great white sharks, all that. But we were, God, it was like San Francisco or like Punta Givato or something like that. We paddled out, and I was with Bill and I think Neil. And there was this boulder, and it was like a symphony. Every, like exactly at like 2 minutes, 10 billion grouper would fly in the air, like a bait ball would come through, and it was like a mushroom cloud, and these things are flying through the air. Wow. And we would all throw, we would all get bit. Sometimes it felt like before they even hit the water, like they would jump out and grab it. We would all get broken off. We would all retie, and by the time we retied, and it went on over and over, and finally, like, we started grabbing like 80-pound stuff, and then we started catching them. But there's just crazy stuff that no one would ever even believe it. Now everyone has the GoPro and like video.
And it's all on
video.
Yeah. But if I went home and said there was mushroom clouds of grouper, they'd be like, "Here."
Yeah, send the vid, buddy.
Yeah.
You see the golden come out of the water.
No photos never happen.
Yeah.
This being on YouTube, we'd love to hear from, people that are watching this.
For sure.
On stuff that you'd like to see, or if you have questions.
Yeah, we'd love to have you guys back during the season
we can
too.
Hop on and try to help you answer those questions or steer you to a shop or something. Or if there's something you want to see, like you want us to take Ricky out to San Clemente Island and drop him off when there's 200-pound bluefin.
Or Nate.
Or Nate with a little helium balloon and a flying fish and let him there. Stuff like that. Let us know in the comments. And
100%.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate you guys coming on, and like I said, Morgan writes for us, and Trout does as well. He's done some insane seafood recipes. Yeah. He's done a couple videos too. They're all time. I promise you, if you try any of them, you're gonna come back and try the rest. Nate has a few on there too. He's a pretty good cook. Nate's definitely
no slouch. He's like the dark horse. He's got some hidden gems.
Yeah, definitely check their stuff out and look out for it more in the coming year. I think we're definitely excited about what's to come, and we all love fishing, so it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah, for sure. I think the last thing I would say.
Go ahead, man.
is like for all the younger people. I see all these groms creeping the lagoons and the golf courses.
Yeah.
You said what's next. I never answered. To me, that's what's next. All these younger groms that the passion is back.
Yeah.
Like these kids are risking like
fishing is cool again.
You get in trouble.
Or for the first time.
You can rarely get in trouble nowadays.
No, you get you're in grown-up trouble, right? But like I love the passion of the kids.
Yeah.
And once they all get their driver's licenses, those are the ones that need to get a kayak, and because they're not going to have a boat right away, and that is the way to become a steward of the sea and get ready to slay some dragons. It really is. You start on the kayak, you learn the basics, so by the time you grow into it, that's when you get on a boat and develop your skills.
Yes. Yep. I think you learn stuff from kayak fishing that you can apply on the boat or apply for shore fishing.
100%.
And especially if you, like for those wanting to kayak fish in the ocean, if you surf and you can read the waves and stuff, like the whole Pacific Ocean's your playground. If you get a kayak, you can get out there and get after it and have a lot of fun.
Yeah. And if you can tie a knot while you're wobbling around back and forth and it's crazy out there, I mean, everything else is gravy.
It's easy.
It's easy.
Right on. Well, thanks, guys. That was fun.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Cheers.